This is TV18 and you're watching CNBC TV18.
It's not always that you get the opportunity to speak to LV Vaidyanathan of P&G. LV, thank you so much for joining in. I believe this is the first time you're having a conversation on camera. Are you nervous?
Not at all.
No,
Thanks, Mangalam. Thanks for coming over. Really appreciate it.
Well, you know, we speak at the throes of the end of the festive season, so to say. Everyone's talking about some sort of gradual recovery, but that oomph not being there in the consumer sentiment, so to say. What is your understanding?
We have obviously seen good lot of value growth,
Yeah.
but the volumes have been volumes could have been better than what we had seen over the last 15 years, and that's where the challenge is going to be over the next in the short term and in the medium term. How do you accelerate volume growth and therefore drive overall growth for the business? Right?
So how do you do that?
Look, I think if you go back and look at our strategy, which is what we call as an integrated growth strategy, it starts
Right.
first with identifying, what's the portfolio in which we are going to play, and we have a portfolio of brands and categories in which performance drives brand choice. The second big choice that we have made is to delight the consumer across 5 vectors of superiority, as we call it: product performance,
Yeah.
packaging, communication, retail presence, and value, both consumer and customer value. Third is to have a relentless focus on productivity,
Yeah.
right? Because that helps drive investments into both product superiority and into inputs as well. Fourth is to actually future-proof your business,
Yep.
okay, which is what we call as constructive disruption. The last one is, of course, the organization and the culture that you create in each of the teams, right? So that's been our strategy. That strategy has worked very well for us.
Because P&G is a global organization, I'm sure there have been a lot of learnings from other geographies as well. Everyone's talking about the opportunity in India. We've seen China at that cusp a couple of decades ago. We've seen the United States at that about 5 decades ago as well. When that change happened, what were the changes that eventually ensued in the consumer space, and how did companies benefit from that? What was your learning from the global hub?
Look, I mean, while it's easy for us to kind of go back and look at how per capita incomes have moved and then how our categories have moved, I would say that our categories have moved in very different trajectory across. If you look at, I talked Gillette about how that has moved. Gillette is a very interesting one, Mangalam. You and I talked it the last
Yes.
time, and the best way to dimensionalize this is you go to 2011 World Cup. Of the 15 players, I think there were about 3 or 4 of them who actually sported some
beard.
form of a beard, right? And now if you go back and look at the 2023 World Cup, squad, India squad, you have probably 4 of them who have a clean shaven look, right?
2 of them are your brand ambassadors.
2 of them are brand ambassadors, actually. But despite that, we've had, again, because of the fact that we've spent a lot of time trying to understand consumers, design propositions which delight them, we've been able to grow consistently. So we designed a proposition called Guard for the Indian consumer. Why did we design it? Because unlike the West, most people don't have access to running water.
Right.
So, and you have a fairly hard stubble, correct? So how do you end up having a great shaving experience was something that we had as a challenge. A decade ago, we designed a product called Guard. We actually, at that point in time, 2 out of 3 consumers essentially used double edge. The blade used to cost about 2 rupees. The razor used to cost about less than 10 rupees. Okay, we launched a product where the razor was 25 rupees, the blade was 10 rupees. So you're talking about 5x in this thing. Today we have one of the largest consumer franchise of Guard alone.
How does the global headquarters view India as an opportunity right now? Since the world is talking about this being the decade of India, etc., is that the way the globe sees it as well? I mean, the global headquarters?
Look, India has always been a strategically important priority for the company, but it's become increasingly important for the company as well, simply because they see the demographics, they see the opportunity, and more importantly, they also see the track record that we've had here in India over the last 3 to 4 decades.
So, how does India increasing in their importance change things for you? Do they give you more money? Do they give you more attention? Do they give you more manpower? How does that happen?
It translates into few things. Number one is designing propositions for India. I took Guard as an example, where the proposition was designed in India for the Indian consumers. That's one. Second is, of course, it does translate into a lot more resources in understanding the consumers better, in designing the proposition better for the Indian consumer. I mean, we have the global R&D or the global R&D head for P&G here in India, just to again understand from the consumers and then see what can we do better with the consumers here, right? And that kind of focus and attention that we've got, and from almost every single leadership team member from the global leadership coming here and visiting and understanding what kind of opportunity exists and what really needs to be true for us to be able to deliver the propositions which delight the consumer here in India.
Are there any categories which are present in globally which make sense to be brought to India right now, given the demographics of the Indian market?
I think we constantly keep evaluating, categories, and we keep evaluating their attractiveness from an Indian context standpoint. But we believe that we are there from a strategy standpoint. We have the portfolio of category and brands in which we are present, in which we are making a meaningful difference, in which there is a long runway of growth opportunity here in India.
So let's talk about that long runway itself. Let's start with Femcare itself. Rural penetration is just about 35%. Urban penetration is still about 62%. What's the headroom for growth here, the runway, and how fast do you aspire to, increase this penetration and grow here?
One part of it is the users have grown in this thing, right?
Yes.
A woman uses, they need protection over a 4-day period.
Yes.
Correct? Today what we see is, on an average, there are only 5 pads that are used over a 4-day period. Okay? If you compare that with, let's say, China, for example, that's 22. Indonesia has 7x higher than on a per capita basis versus India. Vietnam is close to 10x and Femcare is an example on a per capita consumption basis. So that's why if you look at it from a runway standpoint, there is runway both on users, as you pointed out. 1 in every 3rd user in urban India still doesn't use pads. 2 out of every 3 users in rural India still doesn't use pads.
What about the 2 factors that may take users out of this as well? One is the sentiment around environment friendliness. If you were to use 22 times more than what you are currently using, the disposal would be an issue, and safe disposal, eco-friendly disposal. And the second one is the leakage of customers to other forms, say something like a menstrual cup, etc. Are there any eco-friendly sanitary pads which you are working on?
Look, I can't comment on the innovation plans that we have, but sustainability is integrated into our strategy. We want to deliver products which are both superior and are sustainable. On sustainability separately, we are anyway working, because it's not just on product alone, but we need to work the ecosystem as well. Ecosystem of the governments on waste collection, recycling, etc. So that effort is always on, and that has nothing to do with just our products alone, but across. As a responsible corporate citizen, we have to make sure that we continue to contribute to the environment in a meaningful and a tangible manner.
On Gillette itself, you said that the underlying macro trend, while you have 60% market share here, when a person thinks of shaving, they think Gillette. For that, the person has to think of shaving. How has that macro trend impacted volumes or sales in Gillette?
Just to correct you, our shares have actually crossed 70% on Gillette.
I took it from the last conference call that you held with the analysts. So
we just crossed 70 there in the thing. But just to come back on this one, right? Let me take how Gillette, even despite the trends of beard, how Gillette can still play a meaningful role.
Yes.
We've got Fusion, which is part of the portfolio, which we have successfully positioned as a trimming tool Different beard styles, different things that you can do with Fusion. And that's been extremely successful there. The second is the runway to convert from double edge to systems and then take them further along is still pretty large. Even amongst the guard users, Mark III gives you a much better shaving experience. So the journey of taking consumers either to complement what they're already doing or taking them to better shaving experiences, which delivers better value, has been on and will continue to be on.
Razors and blades, as an analogy, has been the favorite of B schools across the world. Let me just ask you, since I'm here, what proportion of your revenue is coming from razors? How much of them coming from blades? Because that's the more recurring revenue, so to say.
I actually have never looked at those numbers at all, but I think it's about 30-70 right now. If you look at the systems, 30% of our revenues comes from razors and about 70 comes from the replacements that happen, the handle replacements that happen.
And what would it take for you to actually sponsor the Indian cricket team? Because you do that once and you are inculcating the habit of shaving once again.
Look, I think...
I remember the time when, you would have Rahul Dravid shave in public.
Look, I think Gillette has been very closely associated with sports for a very long time, right? So it continues to be associated. Even today, we have both Shubman Gill and Shreyas Iyer as part of our brand ambassadors. So
just as we speak, there is a spot available on the Indian team jersey for a team sponsor.
Noted.
All right. You introduced sleep-inducing, products as well. How big do you think is that market, and what's the runway there?
I think again, if you go back and look at the study there, Mangalam, what we have found is there's a large-scale sleep deprivation that most of the consumers basically have. Correct? And that's where we've thought, having a supplement will actually help. We've seen that being extremely successful in Europe when we introduced it. In India, to start with a new category, typically, and our experience has always been this, that it typically takes a little longer. So we are here to create categories and create new habits for a much longer period of time. Correct? We typically give ourselves anywhere between 7 to 10 years to really create and establish a very good habit.